Welcome back, live from Just King's World on my Hip Hop Ish. We present to you Dope Read. Dope Read is a collection of books that's designed to elevate your mind and your thought process, make you a better person. We are still reading The 50th Law by 50 Cent and Robert Greene, and we are going into chapter number 6. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the channel, and make sure you read chapters 1 through 5. You can follow right along with me. We're reading it. Chapter 6 is called Lead from the Front, Authority. In any group, the person on top consciously or unconsciously sets the tone. If leaders are fearful, hesitant to take any risk, or overly concerned for their ego and reputation, then this invariably filters its way through the entire group and makes effective action impossible. Complaining and look, if we come across a word that we can't pronounce, we are gonna bring it to the floor. Haranguing, Haranguing. Pronounce that word. People to work harder has a counterproductive effect. You must adapt the opposite style. Imbue your troops with their proper spirits through your actions, not words. They see you working harder than anyone, holding yourself to the highest standards, taking risks with confidence, and making tough decisions. This inspires and binds the group together. In these democratic times, you must practice what you preach. I believe that to be true. Let's go. The Hustler King. No man can properly command an army from the rear. He must be at the front, at the very head of the army. He must be seen there, and the effect of his mind and personal energy must be felt by every officer and man present with it. General William Sherman. By the spring of 1991, young Curtis Jackson had proved himself to be one of the savviest hustlers in the neighborhood. His pool of repeat customers had increased to a point where he had to hire his own crew to keep up with their demand. But as he knew, nothing good ever lasts too long in the hood. Just as Curtis was making plans to expand his business, an older hustler named Wayne began to make threatening gestures towards him. Wayne had recently returned to the streets from prison. He was determined to make as much money as fast as possible and then dominate the local drug trade. Curtis, it seemed, was his main rival. He tried to intimidate the younger hustler, warning him that he better curtail his operation or pay a price. Curtis ignored him. Then Wayne decided to up the ante. He sent out word on the street that he was going to have Curtis killed. Curtis had seen this happen before. He knew that what would happen next. Wayne would never do the job himself. He could not risk a return to prison. Instead, he was banking on the fact that some young kid would hear of his desire to kill Curtis and, eager to gain some street credibility, would take it upon himself to do the dirty work. Sure enough, a few days after hearing of Wayne's intentions, Curtis noticed a young kid named Nitty trailing him on the streets. He felt certain that Nitty was the one planning to do the hit, and it would happen soon. This was the depressing dynamic of hustling in the hood. The more success a hustler had, the more he attracted the wrong kind of attention. Unless he inspired some fear and terror, rivals would keep coming at him, trying to take what he had and continually threaten his position on the streets. Once that started to happen, the once successful dealer would find himself drawn into a cycle of violence, reprisals, and time in the pen. There were a few hustlers, however, who had somehow managed to rise above the dynamic in the hood. They were like kings. Just hearing their names or seeing them on the street would elicit a gut reaction, a mix of fright and admiration. What elevated them above others was a series of actions they had taken in the past that demonstrated they were fearless and smart. Their maneuvers would be unpredictable and all of the more terrifying for it. If people thought of challenging them, they would quickly remember what these types had done in other circumstances and back off. All of this would give them an aura of power and mystery. Instead of challengers on all sides, they would have disciples ready to follow them as far as they wanted. If Curtis saw himself as the kingly type, it was time now to show it to others as dramatically as possible. With death staring him in the face, he worked to control his emotions and thought long and hard about the dilemma that Wayne had posed. If he came after Wayne to kill him first, Wayne would be ready and would have the perfect excuse to kill Curtis in self-defense. If instead he went after Nitty and killed him, the police would catch Curtis and he would end up in prison for a long time. An equally fortunate result for Wayne. And if he did nothing, Nitty would finish him off. But Wayne's strategy had a fatal flaw. His fear of doing the job with his own hands. He was no king himself, but just another frightened hustler pretending to be tough. Curtis would come after him from an unexpected angle and turn everything around. Without wasting any more time, he asked a member of his crew, named Tony, to accompany him that afternoon. Together, they surprised Nitty on the street, and while Tony held him, Curtis slashed the kid in the face with a razor blade. He did it just deep enough to send him screaming to the hospital and to leave a scar for a while. Then a few hours later, he and Tony found Wayne's empty car and shot it up. An ambiguous message that meant either they hoped he was inside or they was taunting him to come out and attack them in the open. The following day, the dominoes fell just as Curtis thought they would. Nitty sought out Wayne, expecting that the two of them would then go together to exact revenge on Curtis. After all, Wayne had been attacked as well. Wayne, however, still insisted the kid do it alone. Now Nitty could see through the game. He was just the patsy to do the dirty work, and Wayne was not as tough as he had made himself out to be. Nitty would have nothing more to do with him, but he was also too afraid to take on Curtis by himself. He decided he could live with the scar. Wayne was now in a delicate position. If he asked someone else to do the job, it would start to look like what it was, a man too scared to do it himself. Better to let the whole thing just go away. In the days to come, the hood was abuzz with the story of what happened. Young Curtis had outmaneuvered and outsmarted the older rival. Unlike the latter, he was unafraid to do the violence himself. What he had done was bold and dramatic. It had come out of nowhere. Every time people would see Nitty on the street with the long scar on his face, they were reminded of the incident. Rivals would now have to think twice before challenging his status. He showed he was tough and crafty, and those in his crew were duly and impressed with his sang-froid and how he had turned the situation around. They now saw him differently, as somebody who could last in the jungle and was worth following. Curtis followed this up with other similar actions, and slowly he elevated himself above the other hustlers. Now there were younger ones who looked up to him and would soon form their core of a devoted band of disciples who would help him in his transition into music. After the success of his first album in 2003, Curtis, now known as 50 Cent, began to realize his dream of forging a business empire. But as this took shape in the months and years to follow, he began to feel that something was wrong. It would be natural to believe that with his current position and fame, those working for him would simply follow his lead and do what he wanted. But his whole life had been a lesson in the opposite. People continually take from you. They doubt your powers and challenge you. In this environment, his executives and managers were not trying to take his money or his life, but rather he had the feeling they were nibbling away at his power, trying to soften his image and make him more corporate and predictable. If he let this go on, he would lose the only quality that made him different, his propensity to take risks and do the unexpected. He might become a safe investment, but he would no longer be a leader and a creative force. In this world, you cannot relax and rest in your name. your past achievements, your title. You have to fight to impose your difference and compel people to follow your lead. All of these thoughts became painfully clear to him in the summer of 2007. His third album, Curtis, was to be released in September of that year, and everyone seemed to be asleep. The record label, Interscope, was acting as if the album would sell itself. His management team had put together a marketing campaign that had felt was too tame, passive, and corporate. They were trying to control too much. Then one August afternoon, an employee at G-Unit Records, 50's own label within Interscope, told him that a video from the upcoming album somehow got leaked on the internet. If it spread, it would mess up the carefully orchestrated rollout of songs that had been planned for that month. 50 was the first to hear of this, and after contemplating what to do next, he decided it was finally time to shake up the dynamic, do the unpredictable, and play the part of the Hustler King. He called into the office's radio and internet team at G-Unit. Instead of working to contain the viral spread of the video, the usual response to such a problem, and what management would advocate, he ordered them to, all right, here's another word. Let's sound this word out. But let's spell it out. surreptitiously. Surreptitiously leak it to other sites and let it spread like wildfire. On top of this move, they created the following story to tell journalists for public consumption. When 50 heard of the leak, he flew into a wild rage. He threw his phone at the window with such force and he cracked it. He tore the plasma TV off the wall and smashed it into pieces. He left the building in a fit. And the last thing they heard him yelling was that he was shutting it all down and going on vacation. That evening, on 50's orders, they had the maintenance man for the building take pictures of the damage, all fake for this purpose, and then leak the photos to the internet. They were to keep all of this a secret. Not even management was to know that this drama was completely manufactured. In the days to come, 50 watched with satisfaction as the story spread everywhere. Interscope was awakened from its slumber. Management was sent the message that he was now in command. If he refused to do any more publicity as he had threatened, their whole campaign was doomed. They had to follow his lead here and let him set the tone for the public, for the publicity, which meant something more aggressive and fluid. Among 50's executives and employees, word spread quickly of what had supposedly happened, his reputation for being unpredictable and violent brought to life. When they now saw him in the offices, they felt a twinge of fear. Better to pay attention to what he wanted than risk witnessing his anger. And for the public, this was just the kind of story they expected from the thug rapper. It compelled their attention. They could laugh at his out-of-control antics, not realizing that it was 50 directing the drama. Who would have the last laugh? This is how 50 operates right now. Y'all don't understand? This is how 50 operates. He controls the narrative, period. The fearless approach. When I reached the top in business, I adjusted to my new position. I became bolder and crazier than before. And I listened even less to people who try to slow me down. 50 Cent. Throughout history, we have witnessed the following pattern. Certain people stand out from the crowd because of some special skill or talent that they have. Perhaps they are masters at the political game, knowing how to charm and win the proper allies. Or maybe they have superior technical knowledge in their field. Or maybe they are the ones who initiate some bold venture that has success. In any event, these types suddenly find themselves in leadership positions, something for which their past experience and education had not prepared them. Now they are alone at the top, their every decision and action scrutinized by the group, all the public. The pressures can be intense, and what inevitably happens is that many of them unconsciously succumb to all kinds of fears. Whereas before they might have been bold and creative, now they grow cautious and conservative, aware of the heightened states, secretly scared of being held accountable for the success of the group. their own delegate, poll everyone for their opinions, or refrain from making the hard decisions, or they become excessively dictatorial, like dictating, trying to control everything. Another sign of weakness and insecurity. It is the story of great senators who make lousy presidents, bold lieutenants who turn into mediocre generals, or top-level managers who become incompetent executives. And yet among the group, there were the inevitably a few who demonstrate the opposite. They rise to the position, displaying extraordinary leadership skills that no one had suspected were in them. We find in this group people like Napoleon Bonaparte, Mahatma Gandhi, and Winston Churchill. What links these people is not some mysterious skill or bit of knowledge, but rather a quality of character, a temperament that reveals the essence of the art. They are fearless. They do not shrink from making the hard decisions by themselves. Instead, they seem to relish such responsibility. They do not suddenly become more conservative, but in fact show a prosperity for bold action. They exhibit tremendous grace under fire. Such types comes to understand in various ways that a leader has a unique power that generally goes untapped. Any group tends to assume the spirit and energy of the person on top. If that person is weak and passive, then the group tends to splinter into factions. If such leadership lack confidence, the insecurities tend to filter their way down the line. Their nervous, fretful moods put everyone on edge, but there is always the opposite possibility. A leader who is audacious out in front and setting the tone and agenda for the group sparks a higher energy level and confidence. Such a person on top does not need to yell or push people around. Those below want to follow his or her lead because it is strong and inspiring. In war, where leadership skills are more immediately apparent and necessary because lives are at stake, we can distinguish two leadership styles, from behind or from the front. The former type of general likes to stay in his tent or headquarters and bark out orders, feelings that having such distance makes it easier to command. This style can also mean involving lieutenants and other generals in important decisions, choosing to lead by committee. In both cases, the commander is trying to hide himself from scrutiny, accountability, and danger. The greatest general in history, however, are invariably those who lead from the front and by themselves. They can be seen by the troops and the head of the army, exposing themselves to the same fate as the foot soldier. The Drake of Wellington said that the mere appearance of Napoleon Bonaparte at the head of his army translated into the equivalent of an additional 40,000 men. A kind of electrical charge passes through their troops. He is sharing in their sacrifices, leading by example. It is almost religious connotations. We notice the same two styles in business and politics as well. The executives who lead from behind will always try to disguise it as a virtue, the need for secrecy, or their desire to be more fair and democratic. But it really stems from fear and invariably leads to a lack of respect from those below. The opposite style, leading from the front and by example, has the same power in the office as it does in the battlefield. Leaders who work harder than anyone else, who practice what they preach, who are not afraid to be accountable for tough decisions or to take risks, will find that they have created a well of respect that will pay great dividends down the road. They can ask for sacrifices, punish troublemakers, and make occasional mistakes, all without facing the usual grumbling and doubts. They don't have to yell, complain, and force their men and women to follow. People do so willingly. In urban environments such as Southside Queens, respect is an extremely important issue. In other places, your background, education, or resume might lend you some authority and credibility, but not in the hood. There, everyone starts from zero. To gain respect from your peers, you must repeatedly prove yourself. People are constantly prone to doubting your abilities and your power. You must show again and again that you have what it takes to thrive and to last. Big words and promises mean nothing. Only actions carry weight. If you are authentic, as tough as you seem to be, then you will earn respect that will make people back off and make your life that much easier. This should be your perspective as well. You start with nothing in this world. Any titles, money, or privilege you inherit are actually hindrances. They dilute you into believing you are owed respect. If you continue to impose your will because of such privileges, people will come to disdain and despise you. Instead, only your actions can prove your worth. They tell people who you are. You must imagine that you are continually being challenged to show that you deserve the position you occupy. In a culture full of fakery and hype, you will stand out as someone authentic and worthy of respect. The greatest leaders in history all inevitably learned by experience the following lesson. It is much better to be feared and respected than to be loved. As a prime example, look at the film director John Ford, the man behind some of the greatest films in Hollywood history. The task of film directors can be particularly difficult. They have to deal with large crews, actors with their delicate egos, and dictatorial producers who want to meddle every step of the way, all the while being under extreme time limits and with large amounts of money at stake. The tendency for directors to give ground on these various battlefields to placate and cajole the actors to let the producers have their way here and there to gain some cooperation by being pleasant and likable. Ford was by nature a sensitive and empathetic man, but he learned that if he valued this side of his personality, he quickly lost control over the final project. The actors and producers would begin to assert themselves and the film would lose any sense of cohesion. He noticed that the notoriously non-directors were really lasted very long. They were pushed around and the films were lousy. Early on in his career, he decided if he would have to forge a kind of mask for himself, that of a man who was implacable and even a bit frightening. On the set, he made it clear he was not the usual prima donna director. He would work longer hours than anyone. If they were filming on some location with harsh conditions, he would sleep in a tent like everyone else and share their bad food. On occasion, he would get into violent fistfights on the set, most often with the leading actors such as John Wayne. These fights were now not for show. They were bruising, and if he engaged in them with all of his strength, making the actors fight back with equal force, this would set the tone. An actor would tend to feel embarrassed by engaging in his usually prissy behavior and ego tantrums. Everyone was treated the same. Even the Archduke of Austria, trying to carve out a career in Hollywood as a Hollywood actor, was yelled at and pushed into a ditch by Ford himself. He had a unique way of directing actors. He would say only a few well-chosen words about what he wanted from them. Then, if they did the wrong thing on the set, he would brutally humiliate them in front of everyone. They quickly learned they had to pay attention to the few words he spoke and to his body language on the set, which would often tell more. They had to raise their levels of concentration and bring even more of themselves to the part. Once, when the famous producer Samuel Goldwyn visited the set, he told Ford he just wanted to watch him work, a producer's way of spying and applying pressure. Ford didn't say a word. The next day, however, he visited Goldwyn's office, and just sat silently in the chair by Goldwyn's desk, glaring at him. After a while, Goldwyn, exasperated, asked him what he was doing. He just wanted to watch Goldwyn's work, Ford answered. Goldwyn never visited him again on the set and quickly learned to give him his space. All of this had a strange and paradoxical effect on the cast and crew. They came to love working for John Ford and would die to gain place among his exclusive team of return staff. His standards were so high, it forced them to work harder. He made them superior actors and technicians. On an occasional nice gesture or compliment on his part carried double the weight and would be remembered for a lifetime. The end results of his tough and unforgiving manner was that he managed to maintain a higher degree of control over the final product than most other directors, and his films were consistently of the highest quality. Nobody dared to challenge his authority, and he lasted in Hollywood as the king of westerns and action films for well over 40 years, an unprecedented achievement in the industry. Understand, to be a leader often requires making tough choices, getting people to do things against their will. If you have chosen the soft, pleasing, compliment style of leadership out of fear of being disliked, you will find yourself with less and less room to compel people to work harder or make sacrifices. If you suddenly try to be tough, they often feel wounded and personally upset. They can move from love to hate. The opposite approach yields the opposite result. If you build a reputation for toughness and getting results, people might resent you, but you will establish a foundation of respect. You are demonstrating genuine qualities of leadership that speak to everyone. Now, with time and a well-founded authority, you have room to back off and reward people, even to be nice. When you do so, it will be seen as a genuine gesture, not an attempt to get people to like you, and it will have double the effect. Keys to fearlessness. For it is a general rule of human nature that people despise those who treat them well and look up to those who make no concessions. Thousands of years ago, our most primitive ancestors formed groups for power and protection. But as these groups got larger, they encountered a problem with human nature that plagues us to this day. Individuals have different levels of talent, ambition, and assertiveness. Their interests do not necessarily converge on all points. When it comes to the important decisions upon which the fate of the tribe hangs, the members will often think of their own narrow agendas. A group of humans is always on the verge of splintering into chaos of divergent interests. For this purpose, leaders were chosen to make the hard decisions in all of this dissension. But the members of the tribe would inevitably feel ambivalence toward the leaders. They saw the necessity for them and the respect that should be paid to their authority, but they feared that the chieftains and kings would accumulate too much power and oppress them. They often wondered why this particular person or family deserved such a lofty position. In many ancient cultures, the king was ritually put to death after a few years to ensure he would not turn into an oppressor. In more advanced ancient civilization, there were constant rebellions against those in power, much more intense and numerous than anything we have known in the modern era. Of all the leaders in ancient times who had to deal with such difficulties, none stood out more than Moses. He had been chosen by God to lead the Hebrews out of slavery in Egypt and to the Promised Land. Although the Hebrews suffered in Egypt, they have relative security. Moses rescued them from this predictable life and set them to wander for 40 years in the wilderness, where they were plagued by lack of food, shelter, and basic comforts. They constantly doubted Moses and even came to hate him, some plotting to kill him as the king who needed to be sacrificed. They saw him as the oppressor and madman. To aid his cause, God would perform regular miracles to show that Moses was chosen and blessed. But these miracles were quickly forgotten, and the Hebrews kept resorting to their endless complaining and here's a word, recalcitrance, recalcitrance. To everyone that seemingly impossible obstacles in his path, Moses resorted to a unique solution. He united the 12 constantly divided tribes around a single simple cause, one God to worship, and the attainable goal of reaching the promised land. He was not there for 40. He was not there for power or glory, but merely to lead them to this much desired goal. Moses could not afford to absent himself for a day or two or to ease up on his leadership. The tribes were continually prone to doubt him and forget the larger picture, the reason for their suffering. The Hebrew word for lead means to be out front, to drive. He had to be out there constantly in the vanguard, unifying them around his vision as of the promised land. This meant being ruthless with the internal dissenters, putting whole families to death that stood in the way of the larger cause. In essence, Moses learned to play a role for the Hebrews, the man who was possessed of the vision from God, indomitable in spirit, and acting for the greater good. A normal tribe member would have to ask him or herself if the promised land was not something that existed merely in Moses' mind, but the force of his conviction and the determination to lead people to the promised land made it hard to doubt him. He had to play this role to the hilt to convince them his top position was legitimate and sanctioned by God. His ability to lead such a fractious group for some 40 years has to be considered the greatest masterpiece of leadership in history. We moderns believe we have moved far beyond our primitive tribal origins. After all, we live in a secular, rational world. A leader today needs to possess certain technical and managerial skills, but 3,000 years of civilizations has not altered human nature. And in fact, the endless difficulties that plague such leaders as Moses have become only more acute. Whereas before, we humans might think first of the tribe, we now think primarily as of ourselves, our careers, and our narrow interests. Office politics is the extreme endpoint of this trend. We are now more distracted than ever, with thousands of bits of information competing for our attention in the course of a day. This makes us less patient and capable of seeing the larger picture. If we were being led out of slavery, we would not be able to focus on the promised land for more than a few minutes. We are much more skeptical when it comes to those in authority. We still feel the ancient ambivalence towards rulers instead of sacrificing them. We feed them to the press and secretly gloat in their downfall. To be a leader now means overcoming these aspects of human nature while still seeming to be fair and decent, an almost impossible task. At the same time, however, people feel this division and selfishness as a depressing phenomenon. They desperately want to believe in a cause, to work for the greater good, to follow a leader who imbues them with a sense of purpose. They are more than receptive to the kind of quasi-religious leadership that Moses embodies. As the one on top, you must rid yourself of the modern prejudices, your fetishism, or technical means. To be a leader still means that you are playing a role out in front, fearlessly driving the group forward. If you fail to unify the group around some glorious cause, some equivalent of the promised land, then you will find that you are having to push and pull your followers who are constantly splitting up into fractions. Instead, you must assume a prophetic air as if you were merely chosen to lead them towards some higher goal. You are compelling them to follow on their own, making less a show of personal power and more a demonstration of the cause that unites them all. This will give you the proper authority to lead and an aura of power. The master of art of leadership, you must see yourself as playing certain parts that will impress your disciples and make them more likely to follow you with the necessary enthusiasm. The following are the 4 main roles you must learn to perform. The visionary. By the beginning of the 20th century, Thomas Alva Edison was seen as America's prominent inventor and scientist. His research labs were the source of some of the most important technological breakthroughs of the time. But the truth is that Edison himself had only a few months of formal education and was not really a scientist at all. Instead, he was a mix of visionary, strategist, and shrewd businessman. His method was simple. He scoured the globe, looking at all of the latest advances in science and technology. With his understanding of business and the latest social trends, he thought long and hard about how some of these advances could be translated into products with great commercial appeal that could transform how people live. Electricity lighting up cities, improved telephones altering the course of commerce, motion pictures, entertaining the masses. He would then hire to the best minds in their fields to bring to life his ideas. Every product that came through his lab was inevitably stamped with Edison's particular vision and sense of marketing. Understand, a group of any size must have goals and long-term objectives to function properly, but human nature serves as a great impediment to this. We are naturally consumed by immediate battles and problems. We find it very difficult, if not unnatural, to focus with any depth on the future. Thinking ahead requires a particular thought process that comes with practice. It means seeing something practical and achievable several years down the road and mapping out how this goal can be achieved. It means thinking in branches, coming up with several paths to get there, depending on circumstances. It means being emotionally attached to the idea, so when 1,000 distractions and interruptions seem to push you off course, you have the strength and purpose to keep at it. Without one person on top who charts the way to the larger goal, the group will wander here and there, grasping at schemes for quick money, or be moved by the narrow political aspirations of one member or another. It will never accomplish anything great. You as the leader are the only bulwark against this endless wandering. You must have the strength to stamp the group with your own personality and vision, giving it a core and an identity. If you lose sight of the larger picture, then only bad things will ensue. You must play the visionary role for some dramatic flair, like Edison, who was a consummate performer and promoter. He would give dazzling presentations of his idea and stage events to get on the front page of newspapers. Like Moses describing the promised land, he could paint an alluring picture of the future and his inventions would help create. This drew in money from investors and inspired his researchers to work even harder. Your own level of excitement and self-belief will convince people that you know where you are going and should be followed. Now, the next is a unifier. When Louis XVI began ruling France in 1661, he inherited an almost impossible situation. The feudal dukes and lords of France maintained tight control over the various realms. Recent ministers such as the Dukes de Richelieu and Cardinal Mazarin had made most of the important decisions that lay outside the control of the lords. The king had been mostly a figurehead, presiding over a deeply fractured country whose power in Europe had been on the decline for quite some time. Louis was determined to reverse all of this, and his method was powerful and dramatic. At first, he kept his intentions to himself, and then suddenly he announced to one and all that he would not appoint a minister to run his country. From now on, they would be his task. Next, he ordered the aristocracy to take up residency in the palace of Versailles that he had recently constructed. The closer they lived to him in the palace, the more influence they would have. If they remained in their duchies to conspire against him, they would find themselves isolated from the new center of power he had created. His more brilliant maneuver, however, was the more subtle one of all. He created a cause for the French people to believe in. The greatness of glory of France itself, which led as its mission to be the center of civilization and refinement, the model for all of Europe. For this purpose, he led the country into various wars to extend France's political might. He became the preeminent patron of the arts, making France the cultural envy of Europe. He created impressive spectacles to delight and distract the public from his power moves. The nobility were not fighting for Louis, but for the greatness for the nation. In this way, he transformed a deeply divided, almost chaotic country into the supreme power of Europe. Understand, the natural dynamic of any group is to splinter into factions. People want to protect and promote their narrow interests, so they form political alliances from within. If you force them to unite under your leadership, stamping out their factions, you may take control, but it will come with great resentment. They will naturally suspect you are increasing your power at their expense. If you do nothing, you will find yourself surrounded by lords and dukes who will make your job impossible. A group needs a centripetal. Hold on, let's spell this word out. Centripetal. Centripetal force to give it unity and cohesion. But it is not enough to have that be you in force of your personality. Instead, it should be a cause that you fearlessly embody. This could be political, ethical, or progressive. You are working to improve the lives of people in your community. For instance, this cause elevates your group above others. It has a quasi-religious aura to it. It is kind of cult feeling. Now, to fight or doubt from within is to stand against the cause or seem selfish. The group infused with this belief system will tend to police itself and root out troublemakers. To play the role effectively, you must be a living example of the cause, much as Louis exemplified the civil power of France in his own carefully crafted behavior. The next one is the role model. You cannot control a large group on your own. You would turn into a micromanager or a dictator, making yourself exhausted and hated. You need to develop a team of lieutenants who are infused with your ideas, your spirits, and your values. Once you have such a team, you can give them latitude to operate on their own, learning for themselves and bringing their own creativity to the cause. This is the system that Napoleon Bonaparte initiated and has since been imitated by the greatest generals of the modern era. He would give his field of marshals a clear sense of goals for a particular campaign or battle, what has become known as the mission statement. They were then empowered to reach the goals in their own way. All that mattered were the results. The idea behind it that those who are fighting on the ground often have a better sense of what needs to be done in the here and now. They have more information at their fingertips than the leader. With a degree of trust in their decisions, they can operate fast and feel more engaged, the exception of the war. The revolutionary system allowed Napoleon's army to move with greater speed and to cultivate a team of higher experience and brilliant field marshals. And it took great courage on his part to trust in them and not try to control everything in the battlefield. Operating with a mission statement is an effective way of softening your image and disguising the extent of your power. You are seen as much more than just a leader. You are a role model, instructing, energizing, and inspiring your lieutenants. In crafting this team, look for people who share your values and are more open to learning. Do not be seduced by a glittering resume. You want them near you to absorb your spirit and ways of doing things. Once you feel they have the proper training, you must not be afraid to let go of the reins and give them more independence. In the end, this will save you much energy and allow you to continue focusing on a greater strategic picture. The last one is the bold knight. Every group has a kind of collective energy, and on its own, this will tend towards inertia. This comes from people's powerful desires to keep things comfortable, easy, and familiar. Over time, in any group, conventions and protocol will assume greater importance and govern people's behavior. The larger the group, the more conservative it will tend to become, and the greater this force of inertia. The paradox of this defense, Passive posture has a depressing effect on morale, much like sitting in one place for too long will lower your spirits. More than likely, you rose to the top by virtue of your own boldness and desperate desire to get ahead. You took risks that made you rise to the occasion with all of your energy and creativity. And this fearless spirit attracted positive attention. The group's inertia would naturally tend to tamp all of that down and neutralize the source of power. Since you are the leader, you are the one who can alter this and set a pace that is more alive and active. You remain the bold and enterprising knight. You force yourself to initiate new projects and domains to conquer. You take proactive measures against possible dangers on the horizon. You seize the initiative against your rivals. You keep your group marching and on the offense. This will excite them and give them a feeling of movement. You are not taking unnecessary risks, but simply adding a dash of aggression to your own normal stayed group. They become used to seeing you out in front and grow addicted to the excitement you bring with each new campaign. The reversal of perspective. We live in times of great mistrust on any form of authority. Some of this springs from envy of those who have power and have achieved something. Some of it comes from experiences with people who abuse their position of power to get their way. In any event, such distrust makes it harder and harder to be a strong and effective leader. Under the sway of this leveling force, you yourself might be tempted to act with less authority, to be more like everyone else, or to make yourself likable. This will only make your job that much harder. Instead, it's better that you see the whole concept of authority in a different light. The word authority comes from the Latin word author, meaning author, a person who creates something new. This could be a work of art, a new way of operating in the world, or new values. The health of any society depends on those who infuse it with such innovations. These works of actions by individuals give them credibility and authority to do more. The great Roman general, man, how you say this dude's name? Let's sound it out, y'all. Scipio. Is that Scipio? Africanus, the elder, invented a new style of warfare in a campaign against Hannibal that was tremendously successful. This gave him the authority to lead the campaign itself and later to launch a political career. For the Romans, if you simply acted as if your position entitled you to certain powers, you lost your authority. You were no longer an author, a contributor, but a passive consumer of power. As a leader, this is how you must view yourself as well. You are an author creating a new order, writing a new act in some drama. You never rest on your laurels or past achievements. Instead, you are constantly taking action that moves the group forward and brings positive results. That record speaks for itself. Despite the spirit of the times, people have a secret yearning to be guarded by a firm hand, by someone who knows where they are going. It is distressful to always feel distracted and wandering. The members of your group will give you the respect and authority you require if you earn it as an author and creator. In the end, if people mistrust and resist your authority, you really have only yourself to blame. A distinguished commander without boldness is unthinkable. No man who is not bold can play such a role, and therefore we consider this quality the first prerequisite of the great military leader. How much of the quality remains by the time he reaches senior rank, after training and experience have affected and modified it, is another question. The greater the extent to which it is retained, the greater the range of his genius. That's the end of chapter 6. That was a good chapter, man. Listen, you must lead from the front. When you think about the businesses that are very successful, perfect example. 2 Chainz spoke about this in his book. he spoke about how the owner of Tesla is out front. He's leading from the front. Elon Musk, leading from the front. If you lead from the front, you get more successful. You get your people to follow you. And therefore, your company, your brand, your position, anything that you have is going to thrive because you're out front. You're taking the risk. You're right there with the soldiers. They see you. They feel like you're a part of them, but they know that they're following you. People want something to believe in. They don't want no dictator. They don't want you don't want people resenting you. You got to kind of play that middle ground, but you got to lead from the front. You lead from behind, you don't know what's going on the field. That's just my takeaway from it. If you made it this far, I appreciate you. I love you. Make sure you leave a comment, a fire down in the comments, and I will see you on chapter 7. All right? Off to the next one.